Welcome everyone to the fifth video in my series Learn C Sharp. What we're going to learn today is user interface and controls. So we're going to talk about GUIs, graphical user interfaces. So we're going to learn graphical user interfaces. We're going to talk about controls. Some examples of those controls are labels, buttons, text boxes. We're going to talk about control properties. We're going to talk about control events. And then we're going to use all this knowledge to build our sample application Calorie Counter. So we're going to learn about graphical user interfaces, and then we're going to use this knowledge to create a user interface for our Calorie Counter application. So let's get started. Let's start Visual Studio 2013. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to go to File, New Project. And since we're coding in C Sharp, I'm going to make sure C Sharp is selected. I'm going to make it a Windows form application, and I'm going to call this Calorie Counter. I'm going to say OK here. Okay, so apparently we already have this name in use. So I'm going to change this to Calorie Counter GUI. And Windows is now creating this application. So when we create a Windows form application, Windows will give us a nice form to start with named Form1CS. As you see here on the left-hand side, this is our toolbox with all the controls that we can use inside this form. We have a properties window over here, and we have our solution explorer. So what is a control? A control is basically an item that you can place onto your graphical user interface, and it's going to let the user interact with the form or provide information to the user or something of that nature. So that's pretty much what controls are. And you see here on the left hand side we have a whole listing of controls, and let me zoom into this so you can see it a little clearer. Let me make this, okay, so here we go. So here's a list of controls. You see background worker, we have a comment button, we have a checkbox, a checklist, and the list goes on and on. Data set control, a date and time picker control. Let me scroll down here. And as you see, we have a group box, we have scroll bars. So out of the box, Visual Studio gives us a lot of controls that we have at our disposal that we can use in our form. Label, listbox, menu strip, month calendar, a notification icon. So we have a lot of options at our disposal, and it's pretty nice to have all these tools at your disposal. We have a tree view, a web browser, text box. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pick a control and we're going to drag it onto our form. Now the form in itself is a control, so let me zoom out here and let me click on form. Every control has properties. So if you look over here in the properties window, let me bring this over a little bit so we can see it a little clearer. So when I click on form, you notice here in the properties window, it tells me that it's showing us the information for form 1, and it gives us a bunch of properties here about this form. So you see we have the font, and if we click on this, the size is 8.25, the control text is black, we have allow drop. So these are, and let me zoom into this so you guys can see this a little better. So these are all the properties of this form. And these properties alter how this form works, or how the form looks, or how the form behaves. So let's actually change one of these properties. What I want to change here is, if we look at our form, and let me zoom this over here so you can see this. If we look over here, you see that we have the form and it's called form 1. I want to change this property. I don't want this form to be called form 1. So if I go to the properties window and I scroll up a little bit, you see here that there's a property called text. Let me scroll this up so you guys can see it. There's a property here called text, and you see it has here form 1. So this property is what sets what it says up here in this title bar. So if I want to change this here form 1, I want to call this calorie counter. I'm going to click on this here and I'm going to type calorie counter and I'll hit enter. And what you'll see is we've just changed the property for this form, and we've changed the text property. The text property is the title of the form. So you see that we've typed calorie counter here, and it's actually populated the title with calorie counter. So that's just one sample of a property that we can set for the form. And one thing you'll notice is that there's no code involved. Let me zoom out, or let me zoom over so you can see the caption for the form actually. Here's the title, and you'll see that it changed the title to calorie counter. So let me zoom out. So what you'll notice is that there was no code that we wrote here. There was nothing, nothing in code that we wrote. We just simply changed the property, text, and this property changed the title of the form. So that's one sample of properties, and you can go through this list and you can change any of these properties you want. Okay, so let's put a control that everyone is familiar with or everyone uses in web pages and applications all the time. Let's throw a button control on here. So I'm going to click on button, and you see what it says here. It says raises an event when the user clicks it. So let me drag this. I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag it onto my form. And you'll see here that the properties window pulls up. And what I like to do with the properties window is you have an option here to sort the properties alphabetically. Right now we have it categorized, so it shows properties in categories. I'm going to select this because I like to see my properties in alphabetical order. So you see what that did is it puts all the properties in alphabetical order and it's not categorized. So we look at some of these properties for our button. The name of the button is button 1. Now the name of the button is how we're going to reference this button when we actually write code. So you always want to give this a meaningful name. So I'm going to change this property right now, and I'm going to call it btn. I'm going to give it a prefix, and that means it's a button, and I'm going to say exit. So we've named this control or this button, and we named it button exit. Let me click back on the control. And then as I go down here, the control also has a text property. And as you see here, it says button 1. Now that text property is what's going to display on the button. So let me change this and let me call it exit, because this button is going to be what's going to exit our application. And let me actually move it down here at the bottom of the application. Okay, so we've set another property. We've set the text property to exit. And we have a visible property. If we don't want to show this control, we can set it to false. And this control basically will be visible when the application starts. And let me actually show you guys that. If I were to run this application, I'm going to go up here and hit start to run the application. And what you'll see is that I get the application. It's calorie counter, but there's no button, and that's because we set the property to false. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to change this property. I'm going to make it true, and I'm going to rerun this application, and you'll see that now we can see the exit button. So if we click on this now, there's no code. We've written no code to tell this exit button what to do when we click on it, so nothing will happen. So I'm going to close this application. Just another sample of the property. So without writing code, we could alter the controls on our form. What else can controls do? As I mentioned before, when we clicked on the control, nothing happened. So we have to be able to write code to make something happen here. So if we look over here, there's a little lightning bolt, and if I hover over it, it says events. So if I click on events, these are all the methods or all the events that this button will produce when we operate on it. When we click on it, for example, here's click. When we change the size. So in our code, as the program is running, if we add code to any of these methods here, that code will run when that event is caused, when that event happens. So control added, the most common is click. We want to do something when the user clicks the button, but you get to see other ones, drag drop, drag enter, enter, the font's changed, when you leave the control, when you move, padding changed. We're going to go over events more in depth when we actually code the user interface. This tutorial is just to show you the main elements of the graphical user interface. So you have events, which are all these. If you wanted to code this event, you have a few ways that you can write that code. You can come here to this button and double click on exit, or you could double click over here. So I'm going to double click on exit, and this is actually going to open a code window. And what you'll see is this is the code for the form. So our form is called form1cs, and you see here it says design. So this is the design aspect of the form. When we double click on the element or control, you'll see form1.cs comes up, and that stands for C#. And this is the code for that form. So as you see here, we clicked on that button and it gave us the button exit click event. This is the name of our control. And the event that this function or this method here is going to handle is the click event. So if we wanted to, whatever code we write here, it will execute when that button is clicked. So I just wanted to show you this. I'm not going to get into that right now at this moment. Let's go back to the GUI and the design of the form. So we're creating a calorie counter, and I'm gonna make this form a little bit bigger here, spread it out, and let me move this here a little bit so you guys can see this a little bit clearer. Okay, so I'm going to move this exit button down to the bottom here. And the purpose of the calorie counter is so that a user can keep track of the calories that they eat throughout the day. It will give them a running total, show them, maybe possibly weekly, monthly, how many calories they eat per day, and just kind of let them track their weight and see, see how they're doing on their diet. I am a programmer, so I sit in front of the PC a lot, and I could stand to lose a few pounds. That's why I'm going to create this application, and this will be our sample application. All right, so we have an exit button. What we need is we need a label on here. Let's put the label on here. And if you remember in our last application, we asked the user for the food that they ate, and we also asked them for the calories that food contained. So we're going to add that here first. So I'm going to drag this label property right over here, and I'm going to look in the properties window, and I don't want it to say label 1, so I'm going to change the text property of this label. Okay, so here goes text, and it says label 1. I'm going to change this, and I'm going to have it say enter your food. Okay, so enter your food comes here. Now we need a text box. We have a label, and we're going to actually give this label a name before we leave it. So I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to put LBL as a prefix, and I'll say enter food. Okay, so we gave this label a name, and we modified the text property so that it displays what we want. Now we need some kind of mechanism so that the user can type in the food that they want to record. So if I go over here, the control that does that is going to be a text box. And as you look at If you look at the tooltip, it says enables the user to enter text and provides multi-line editing and password character masking. Okay, so that's perfect. Let's grab this text box and put it here. Now, if uh, you notice these lines pop up as I'm moving this control around, and it's those lines serve as a guide so you can align your controls. Another way that you can align your controls is, let's say, let me select this control. I'm going to hit the control key and select this one. And if you look up here, these are these little icons will help you align the control without you having to try to match up lines yourself. So let's say I want to align the middle of these. You see here it says align middles. I'm going to click this, and as you see, it aligned the middle of the control, so now they're straight across. You can align the bottoms. So let me select this one, hit control. Here's align bottoms, and you see how the control moved, and now they're both aligned on the bottom. I like the center, so I'm going to re-click these, and I'm going to say align middles. It kind of gives me what I want. I like the look of it. All right, so I'm going to click in this text box, and in a text box, there's really nothing to display. Here's our label. There's no reason to display anything inside the text box. So I'm just going to name the text box so that we can reference it in code. So I'm going to say txt for text box, give it a prefix so that when I'm using this in code, I know that txt is a text box, and I'm going to call it food entry. Okay, so we could look at any other properties that we may want to change. I don't see any right now that I would want to change. Kind of looks good to me, so I'm gonna leave that as is. Actually, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna leave this as is. All right, so we have a label, we have a text box. Let's run this application and let's see what we get here. All right, so if you look at this, you'll see we have an application, we have the label we wanted, and we have a text box. And in here we could type whatever we want. Perfect. So let me close this application. The next part we want to know is we want to know the calories for the food entered. So let's go here, let's grab another label, and I want to line up these labels. So I'm going to click on the one I want to align this label with, and then I'm going to click this label, control and click, and I want to align the left hand side of these labels. So over here you see there's align lefts. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see that it's aligned our labels. So I want to change this label, so I'm going to alter the text property. So let me go over here to text, and I'm going to name this label enter, or I'm going to write enter your calories. I'm going to set the text to that. And as you see, it's changed this to enter your calories. So now I'm going to give this label a name, and I'm going to call it, oh, see, I'm on form 1. So what's selected right now is the form. So I want to make sure I'm on the label. So let me select the label here. And let me go to name. And I'm going to call this label calories. Okay. So as you see here, this doesn't match up. This text box is actually covering this. And okay, so something funny is going on here. It looks like I changed the wrong label. So let me change this back. You see what I did was I entered label enter food. I changed the text property thinking I was changing this label. So let me fix that. This should be enter your food. Okay, so let me click here. Okay, so this went back to enter your food. We have enter your calories. And now we need a text box so that we can enter our calories. So let's go back and let's look at the text box. Here goes text box. Let's drag it onto our form. And I don't like the fact that these are a little offset. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on this one first. Let me align middles here. Click on enter your calories, control, and click on the text box. I'm going to align middles here. And then I'm going to click on this text box, and I'm going to control and click on this text box, and I'm going to align these on the left. Okay, there we go. So that looks a little cleaner to me. So we still have to name this text box. Let's give it a name. As you see, as default, Microsoft gives it a name, textbox1. We're going to rename that, and we're going to call it text calories. And what you notice what I'm doing here, I'm not actually clicking in this box. If you double click here, it'll select whatever's in the properties box here. So it's just a shorthand way to select what's here in this box. Okay, so we have enter your food, we have enter your calories. Now what we need next is we need something so that the user can click so that it'll take this information, add it to the program and display it somewhere. So let's put a button on this form. Okay, we're going to drag this here. We're going to put this button right here. And again, we're going to change the text of the button because we don't want it to say button 1. So before we do that, let's change the name. Let's call this button save calories. And then let's change the text to, what should we change it to? Let's change it to calculate, because what we want is we want this program to take in this information and we want it to show a running total for a given day. So let's say calculate. We could also put submit. Actually, let's do that. Let's put submit. Maybe it makes more sense. So let's put submit. Okay, let's see here. What did I change? Text is submit. Okay, again, you see here that the form is selected. I actually changed the text for the form, and up here you see submit. So let me change that back to Calorie Counter. Another way to know which control you're working with is if you see up here it tells you Windows Form. I could hit this drop down arrow here and I could select my button save calories right here. So let me click on that, and I'm going to change this to submit and hit enter. Okay, so we changed our button to submit, and this form here is way too big, so I'm going to resize this to make it a little smaller. I'm going to drag this exit button right over here, and I'm going to make this form smaller. So you see, if I select the form, you'll see there's these little white boxes here. You can use these boxes to change the size of your form. You see, you get a double arrow. So I'm going to click and I'm going to drag this over here. And the same with the bottom. I'm going to click and drag this over here so our application is a little smaller. And I'm going to move this a little bit further down here. And actually, let me make this just a tiny wee bit bigger. Okay. Move this over here. Okay, so we have enter your food, we have enter your calories, and we have submit. What I would like to do is I would like to kind of group these together or give the user some kind of visual that these work together. Now there's a control called the group box. And if you see what it says here, displays a frame around the group of controls with an optional caption. So I'm actually, let's use it. I mean, I think it's a good tool. So I'm going to grab it, drag it here, and you see it gives me a caption and it gives me a little frame where I could put stuff into. So let me name this group box. Or first, let me give it text. And I'm going to change the caption to enter calories. Let's say enter calories, and you see it gives me this enter calories here as the caption, so that's the text property. So you see for every control, the text property may behave differently. For the button, we know that it changes the face. For labels, it changes the face. For group box control, we know that it will change the caption. All right, so let me give the group box a name. So I'm going to say G box enter calories, and that works for me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this group box. You see when I hover over these squares, I get a double arrow. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to drag controls onto this group box. So I'm going to grab the submit and I'm going to drag it down here. Now what you'll notice is that once I drag this into this group box, if I move this group box, that control comes with it. So if I move this group box here now, this control is now part of this group box, and whenever I move it, it goes with the group box. So sort of a nice reason, or a good reason to group your controls. So I'm going to do the same with these other controls. I'm going to grab them all, control, hit control. I'm going to drag them into this group box like right here. And then I'm going to take this group box and I'm going to drag it up here to the top. And there we go. So we have a nice frame for the user. So when they look at this form, they're going to know, okay, this is one section. And here I'm going to enter my food and enter my calories. Now, the second thing we want to do with this GUI for now is that once the user hits submit, we want to show a running total. We want to know how many calories the user has consumed for that day, and we probably want something displaying all the foods that the user has eaten and the calorie count. So I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger here because now that I think about that, we're going to need some more space. I'm going to start by adding another group box. So let's add another group box up here, and let me line it up with this one here. And this group box we're going to name results. So I'm going to go up here first, give it a name, group box, results. And I'm going to change the caption via the text property. So I'm going to say results. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because we're going to need more space. And actually, it's actually kind of, let's line this up right here. Let's put this here. And let's drag this down a little bit. All right, so we have results. What we want is we want a few things in this results panel, or this result group box. We want to show a running total for the total calories submitted, and we want to show all the foods that the user entered and its prospective calories. So how do we do that? There's another control here that we could use, and that control is called a list box. And if you see here, it says displays the list from which the user can select items. Is that the best tool to use? Let's look at these. Let's look at the other controls we have. A checkbox. We have a combo box, a context menu, group box, labels. Okay, I'm gonna go with list box because I think that's our best option here. And what you'll see is that if a user wants to remove items that they've entered, a list box will come in fairly handy there. So I'm going to drag a list box over here. And as you see, we have a list box. And I'm going to put the list box here and I'm going to give it a name. And let's call it list box. What can we call it? This is gonna hold the foods that the user has entered. So let's say list box foods. And then we want to give this a label. So let's drag a label here. And let's kind of match these up here. Let's align them. And let's change the label. Let's change the label and let's make it say food lists. Probably we can change this later. There's probably something better to put there, but for now let's say food list, and I'm using my arrows here. Another thing you can do without using the mouse or these align buttons up here is you can select the control and you could use your up and down arrows to kind of move it over a little bit. So on my keyboard I'm pressing up and down and it's moving these controls. So let me move that right there, and let's give this label a name, label food list. Okay, so we have the user's going to enter a food, enter calories. They're going to hit submit. Inside this list box, we're going to display the food and the calories, the food and the calories. We also want to show a total. So let's add another label, and let's call this label total. And let's go down here and let's make this label say total calories. Okay, so we have a food list. We're going to display the foods that the user enters here. I don't think these are aligned, so I want to align these better. So let me align these. Oh, okay, there we go. We got more of a straight line there. Let me align these also. Okay, so we have a food list. We have total calories, and to display the total calories, we're going to need a text box. So let me scroll down here. Let me grab a text box and let me put that text box right here. And actually, let me put it underneath to kind of follow this schema here. You know, label underneath list. So let me follow this schema, and I'm going to name this text total calories, and there we have it. Okay, so let me run this application so we can see how this looks when we run it. Let me hit start. And here we go. Here goes our calorie counter. We have frame here, enter your calories. So I would enter a food here, let's say banana, let's say 100. And then when I hit submit, I want this information to be populated inside this list box here. And I want it to calculate a running total for all the foods inside this list box. So since we haven't added any actual code, when we hit submit or we hit exit, nothing is going to happen. But at this point, we have created a graphical user interface that's going to allow us to enter calories and monitor calories. So let me close this. So there goes I'm going to end the lesson here. We were able to use a graphical interface. We placed some controls or some components onto the screen. We used a group box, a text box, a button, a list box. In our next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about events, and we're going to code the events that will make this user interface functional. So we're actually going to code this and actually make it work. This code and this user interface, I will zip it up. I will place it onto my website. You can go there. It's www.codingsite or mycodingsite.net. The link will be in YouTube. So you guys can download this and play with it if you want, make modifications to it if you want, or come back with suggestions if there's something you want to see, if there's a component you want to add, let's talk about that. Put it into the YouTube comments, and we can definitely add and customize this as much as you guys want. So in the next video, we're going to actually add functionality to the GUI that we created, the Calorie Counter application, and then we're going to discuss events, and we're actually going to write code to handle those events. Don't forget, if you like the video, hit the like button. If you like the series, subscribe. You can also visit my website at www.mycodingsite.net wiki. Have a good night, and we will see you on the next video.